So this is Ocean's second appearance here on Truth Wanted. He did a pre-show with us back in the day, which you should go check out before we were really doing this stuff live and stuff. But yeah, this is Ocean. He's a friend of the show. He's really our resident pagan expert. I
think it's technically my third time on the show.
Yeah, that's true.
You recall that one time.
There was that one time, which, if you know what we're talking about, was a pretty funny moment. But yeah, so the difference between now and last time is you actually have a YouTube channel now that you've been working on. Like, tell us about that a little bit.
So people have been saying, like, I've been around the community for some time, and people have been saying, Ocean, do a fucking channel. Like, tell us things about what you believe or whatever. Yeah. And I didn't think it would be a thing necessarily. So I started doing it around April, leading up to Faithless Forum, and I went to Faithless Forum. And since then, the channel's blown up a little bit as far as like relative size. It's in April, it was around 600 subs at that point. Now it's I think it's just past 2,800, which is really quick growth. I'm pretty impressed. It's like I've been impressed with it. I'm kind of like wowed by it. I'm like, okay, all right, guys, you think I'm doing cool? Let's do a thing.
Well, it's kind of interesting because people knew kind of who you were obviously before the YouTube channel and stuff. So you get a bit of growth there, but also I think it's because you're kind of tackling, at least I'm not sure what that kind of community's video scape is like, but to me it's a niche kind of category of videos from a different perspective than at least what's in my general recommended feed, right?
Yeah, I feel that. Like, there's not very many pagan channels. There is a handful, but generally they don't jump into philosophy like I do, or they are very focused on like one particular subset of polytheism. And a lot of times they might be pagan, but they're not polytheists. So polytheists are kind of looking for something. I've gotten messages from polytheists before I started a channel saying, you're on all these other channels, you should make your own stuff, just so that you can get some of your arguments out there in a non-conversation setting. So because before that, like, everything that had me in it was like an hour or two long. So I started making like kind of bite-sized stuff between 5 and 15 minutes, each explaining like a concept that I've used in a debate or that I've used in conversation to try and make a point. And mainly among them that have been popular lately that I've been seeing people use are frith, which essentially means a mutual respect between people. And the other one is latent Christianity, which is like the latent aspects of Christian culture or cultural or social baggage that people carry with them even after they've left Christianity, that sometimes results in behavior that's like exclusive or the need to convert people or those kind of things.
Yeah, and that's something that we talked a little bit about last time, which is interesting because we both come from Christian backgrounds a little bit. So we both kind of share at least some of that baggage that comes with that. And I know I've worked on that myself in the way that I communicate with people, in my judgments about people, in the way that, I kind of organize myself around with others. Like, there's definitely, for a while, I'd say that a lot of that is gone now, but who knows? I'm sure like some of that is still kind of latent in there that I don't even think about, because it's so subconscious.
And I talk a little bit about some of the things that wind up popping up and that sometimes you don't even realize it's there. I had a little Jesus Christ in a carry-on suitcase pop up and explain what it is.
Like, what's a good example? Can you, like, for people who aren't familiar, maybe what we're talking about?
One that I see every once in a while is a need to convert people. That is like, if you don't hold the exact same position as I do, you are less than or not worthy of respect or something like that. And that there can't be like a difference of agreement or a difference of position. Rather, we have to agree on every little thing, which is something that pops up in just the Christian history of denomination splitting. Like, as soon as they disagree on one little thing, they can't cooperate anymore. Fuck it. We got to split up. We got to do all this other shit. And we see that in like when people leave Christianity, sometimes they still take that you have to not believe in God the right way or something like that. So, which is something I've seen a couple of times, and I'm like, I don't know. You guys maybe should calm down about that. but it shows up, and I say that like it sounds like I'm talking about atheists when I say that, but I'm talking about pagans too, because we do that shit just as often.
Well, also, it's important to point out that I don't think this is exclusive to Christians either, but it definitely is in the Christian culture so much to where, like, my thing is a result of Christianity, right? And I'm sure like, yours was like, that's the most common thing that we see because that's the majority kind of religion around here. And that's what you see.
But if you're talking to somebody like an ex-Muslim activist, for example, they're gonna be using latent Islam, which in some like is subtly different, but in some cases better, in some cases worse.
Yeah, so it's interesting because it's the culture that affects us more than the beliefs now. Because like even though we've transitioned from that beliefs, the culture is still there, kind of integrated in the way that we communicate with each other and organize lives, which I just think is fascinating. It just says a lot about how religion plays in our society, right? Like how it actually functions in the real world. It's less so about the theology sometimes and more about the hierarchies that we create in ourselves.
Correct.
Right? So,
and that feeds in a little bit to a concept that most recently I made a video on the Trinity recently, but just before that I did a video on superstition, which I've used a definition that the ancient Greeks used, which is the fear of the supernatural such that it impedes on one's life or liberty. That's a simplified definition. I give the full one in the video, but there are times where people in their adherence to the supernatural or adherence to just religion in general will adhere to it in such a way that they want to impede, that they seem to impede on their own lives or enforce it in such a way that it affects other people's freedoms. Gay marriage, for example, is a huge one in our history.
Yeah, for sure. And it's so like, it's weird because again, like it's so common now. Like for us, like there's nothing that we have to sacrifice in letting other people marry each other, like two men wanting to marry each other or two women. But when I was a Christian, that was such a bigger deal to me. And even though like it wasn't my life to control, it wasn't, I have nothing to do with these other people, yet for some reason, this was something that bothered me. And this was something that I was told, one, I shouldn't even be thinking about, but two, like I should have this opinion about this and shouldn't consider, any other options, which I don't know. I don't know why that was so necessary. I don't know why, like, what the advantage was of having a belief like that, because it really didn't serve me in any way. And if anything, it caused more harm and strife in my life, right?
Yeah, I guess I was, as a Christian for a period of time, I was like I had that position of, well, maybe it's not marriage, maybe it's civil liberties or something like that. And, that position looking back on it was ridiculous. There wasn't really a reason for me to hold that. It was simply, I think that that had a lot to do with that cultural Christian background of just like carrying that along with me, right? Like all of a sudden, okay, well, I mean, and even then, actually, I was a Christian still at the time. But once I left Christianity, the reasons for holding those kind of positions where I have to enforce it on somebody else started to drop away fairly quickly. And the further I get from Christianity, the more I see that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for me, it was like, I think the older I got, especially in college, when you start to, like, I was particularly in a city where it's very multicultural, got to see lots of different people from around the world with different kinds of ideas and practices. And it's like, it became weirder and weirder for me to talk about my own ideas because when you compared it to other people, it's like, oh, it doesn't sound as good anymore when I say this kind of stuff out loud, talking about like the roles of men and women of what I think they should be in society or
oh boy.
No, like that was like, real beliefs that I had. It was just like, oh, like now that I'm really thinking about it, kind of examining it, it's really uncomfortable for me to just be like, hey, not because inherent to the belief, right, is this idea of, oh, not only do I think that this should be the way things are, but you should think this too. Like that's just it's kind of built in there, and it's hard to circumnavigate that. And I see a lot of Christians today do try to circumnavigate that a little bit, like trying to. I don't know. I don't want to say make it more wishy-washy, but the emphasis on, yeah, you know what I'm saying, right? Like,
there's some Christians that can kind of pull it off a little bit. Like when you get into versions of Christianity, like Episcopalianism. I'm an ex-Episcopalian. When I started out as a Southern Baptist, and then I went into the Episcopalian church, and things changed like a whole lot. Just like even the approach to what Jesus is in the first place is radically different from the Episcopalian approach to the Baptist approach. And even though I have like some ill will in the back of my mind towards my experiences as a Baptist, I don't hold anything like that towards the Episcopalian experience. I find that they have like a little bit more tolerant of approach. I didn't have any Episcopalians witnessing to me in the same sense that I would have evangelicals do it. But the issues that I do still have is when they have things like hell belief, that in that same sense of what I was terming a superstition is a source a lot of that reason to enforce on others. Like now you're trying to save people from hell and that kind of stuff. And that still exists in Episcopalianism. It still exists in most I would have to say most forms of Christianity, because there are some that don't include it.
Right.
But it's like every Christian has a different idea of what hell is, I guess.
Oh yeah. The reason for converting, the reason for spreading the religion even becomes different, even when you switch the denomination stuff, which is a fascinating thing to consider. But
yeah, absolutely.
I do want to get to some calls, but before we do that, I do want to talk about your Trinity video recently, which I found to be very interesting.
That was fun.
Yeah, like so you decided to tackle the Trinity. Like, what made you want to make a
I've done 2 debates on it in the past, and both of them were very like spur of the moment, where somebody would call me up and say, "Hey, I've got a Christian who wants to debate," and I'd be like, "All right, well, let's talk about the Trinity." I got pulled into one on Non Sequitur show, and I got pulled into one on Modern Day Debate, and I wanted to make a video that kind of like just took the arguments that I've used in those conversations and boiled them down as to why I think the Trinity is just completely incoherent. It's a position that I've held for some time. That it's this idea of the Holy Spirit, the Father, and Jesus are 3 separate entities, but they are also all God that is one entity, but they are not each other. It gets into trying to make that make sense. There's a number of ways to make it make sense, but all the ways to make it make sense are heretical.
Yeah.
So Christians have kind of screwed themselves in order to actually make it a coherent concept. So my position is that, as described, the doctrine of the Trinity is that little graph that you see. It's incoherent. There's no way to actually defend it.
Yeah, and that was an interesting thing that I discovered when I was researching the Christian religion a lot more heavily. It was like, oh, this Trinity thing? Yeah, that wasn't like, I mean, that came a little bit later. Like the word Trinity, like figuring out, oh, the word Trinity doesn't even appear in the Bible. What?
Well, yeah, like and they'll say that. Yeah. Here's the thing, is that they'll say, the Trinity doesn't appear in the Bible, but there's all the scriptural evidence for it.
Yeah.
That's scriptural evidence of polytheism in the Bible. Look out.
Look hot out. Takes. Hot takes.
But it's they want to be monotheists, and they have polytheistic elements of their religion. The Trinity is how they make that make sense.
But see, the Trinity, so it's just God. It's just he's wearing different hats. That's all it is.
That's modalism, man. That's a heresy. Get out of my house.
That's what I was taught. That was I've heard
wearing different hats.
Yeah, he's wearing different hats.
It's God the Shapeshifter. God's now Mystique from X-Men.
Right? No, but yeah, it was always. But then there's even the apologetic though that I always heard was, oh well, yeah, it doesn't make sense. But like that's just the mystery of God. Like that's just kind of we'll never fully know.
It's a mystery of God, and we can't understand him, and then I can't know what God is. If you're gonna say that it's a mystery and therefore I must believe it, I have to believe in something that I don't know. I don't know what it is. I can't cover it. So how do I believe it if I don't know what the fuck it is? I have a lot of trouble with that. I just cuss. Can I do that on this show? I don't even know.
Yes, you're allowed. You have permission. We earned that explicit
right, fucking great.
tag. Yeah, absolutely.
But so that's one of the things that bothers me. Another objection that people put forward is that God transcends logic.
Oh yeah.
That means God's illogical. If the grounding of logic isn't logical, that creates all kinds of problems, because that's another argument that Christians will put forward, is the transcendental argument. They'll say that God is the grounding of all logic, and they make a connection there. But if the Trinity is how God is described, and there's an illogical component there, all of a sudden the grounding of logic is illogical, which the whole reason why God can't lie is because he's the grounding of goodness, of morality. So now you want to try and say that rule doesn't apply with logic. Now God's illogical. Now he's just not only illogical but inconsistent. Everything is screwed.
Yeah, it's a whole thing. Like, see, and this is it's so funny because when you and I talk, it's always we're always deconstructing Christianity together. I remember last time we were hanging out outside of Baylor University campus. And I was worried that we were speaking too loud because we were right on campus at the coffee shop.
Right. Oh, that's right.
And Peep, there is
That's
some Bible.
It is a Christian school. You didn't tell me that. So I'm sitting there. I was like, he says, let's go get coffee. I'm like, sure. So I go to this spot. We go get coffee, right? I'm sitting there and we're just talking away. And I'm thinking it's a coffee shop. Like where I'm from, you can talk about whatever. I live like just down the road from a college as well. And it's like, all right, cool. You can speak about whatever it please you. But then you're like, oh, by the way, this is a Christian campus. I'm like, fucker, what are you talking about?
It's only the largest Christian school in the state. Like,
okay, good job. All right, cool. Yeah, a little forewarning next time, please.
No,
sir.
but because nobody's ever gonna say anything to us. But like, I think there was a Bible study going on at another table, and I'm pretty sure. I'm 90% sure you.
I didn't catch that.
I'm 90% sure you said something like, "Oh yeah, the Trinity is bullshit" or something, and then like I saw that girl look at us, and that was the moment where I was like, "Hey, just by the way, we are at a Christian school." Yeah. So but yeah, it was fun. It's a good time.